Good evening, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to TTT News. Well, if you tuned into the program, you'd see that it was so nice. We did it twice. We spoke with the Minister of Trade and Industry, Senator Paula Gopi-Schoon, and following on the heels of that conversation, we are looking to be talking about the Export Booster Initiative with Dhanraj Harrypersad, General Manager Client Service at ExporTT. So it's time for In-Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Welcome, Mr. Harrypersad. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Happy to be here, DK.
The pleasure is ours. So I want to start off asking, give us an overview of ExporTT. Thanks. We go from there and then we build the conversation up.
Okay. Well, if you are interested in exporting, ExporTT is the place to be. We are that one-stop shop or hub for all things export. So if you are in exporting at this point in time, you're currently an exporter, we have a bunch of support services for you. But if you're thinking about exporting and trying to get into exports, we are the agency that you want to check as well, because we could start identifying what products you should get into based on the export potential. We could start identifying markets for you as well and start letting you know what the import requirements are, what are the things you need to have in place as you try to transition from your domestic sales onto exports. So we have a lot of activities, and it's more or less into two main areas, which are capacity building, where we work with our exporters to get them export ready so that they can strike a deal when we set up business-to-business meetings for them on the export promotion side. So that includes the standards that they require, their productive capacity, ensuring that they have the machinery and equipment, ensuring that their staff have the necessary skills and training to be able to do what they have to do. And then on the export promotion side is where all the thrilling things that you see people out in markets, on trade missions and on trade shows. We are currently in Dubai for that expo there. So that's where all the fascinating things happen. But there's a lot of work that happens prior to that to make sure that our exporters are in position and are ready to take on those opportunities at those events.
I want to talk about some of that work that happens behind the scenes, because like I said, glitz, glamour is one thing to be in Dubai, you're taking selfies, showing off your products and trying to penetrate that market. But even before that, what is some of the work that is needed before you're saying, okay, I think I'm ready to export? Because even before you want to necessarily leave the borders of Trinidad and Tobago, you'd want to be doing work to build your customer, your clientele base locally. So in terms of capacity building, what are some of those incremental things that you try to check off on a checklist?
Okay, so sometimes a company may be doing well domestically and they think that that transition is an easy one. Okay, I'm doing well in Trinidad and Tobago. It's just a simple process of moving on. But then you have to look at, okay, the logistics, that additional cost, the taxes and other expenses and import requirements on the other end that you need to conform to. Maybe there's a difference in language, difference in culture, the way you do business, because we are all familiar with how business is done locally, and generally it's done more or less in the same way within CARICOM. We have that shared culture. But if you move across to Latin America, to the US, where there are higher standards, or to the European Union, where there's a difference of culture, language, etc., then it becomes somewhat difficult. What we have been doing to assist our exporters is that we've developed an export readiness assessment tool that looks at three main areas of strategy, their capacity, as well as their export experience. And that helps us to understand, where they sit currently, and helps us to also identify gaps in their readiness so that we can help them address it, so that they are ready to go after some of those larger markets, particularly outside of CARICOM, because that is generally what we see in terms of the transition. You move on from domestic sales onto CARICOM because that's an easy way of entering the world of exports because of that familiarity. And then you move on to other markets like Latin America, where there's a difference in culture, and onwards onto like the US, where the standards might be higher, much higher, and substantial investments would be required for that. And that's where ExporTT comes in as well. As you progress and the requirements become higher and higher, that's where our capacity building kicks in with our standards implementation program and other initiatives under the Export Booster initiative, where we have the International Certification Fund, for example, where we help our clients meet those very high import requirements. For example, Food Safety Modernization Act in the US or Safe Food for Canadians in Canada. And it's not that we just provide consultancy and we leave it up to them to invest in all the other things. The ICF, what it does differently is it provides changes to infrastructure, support for changes in infrastructure. It provides the equipment necessary. So all the things, we're not just gonna have a consultant walk you through and say, well, you need to correct these million things and then leave you there and to fight up with the bank, but rather we try to support you in terms of the funding to afford these changes that are necessary for you to achieve those standards and gain access to the markets.
So even before we started locking up with the Export Booster initiative, what are some of those things that I need to have in my hand if I'm someone who I want to export and I want to approach ExporTT? Is there a certain amount of time that I need to have been in operation? There's a certain amount of image or clients that I need to have, certain amount of paperwork, sales? What is that base level that I need in order to approach you and say, okay, well, Mr. Harrypersad, help me out with this?
Okay, well, you don't need anything to approach me or anyone in ExporTT to have a conversation about exports. You could check us at any time, and any of our advisors will be happy to carry on that discussion with you. If you are looking to access some of the support services and funding that we offer, then there are certain requirements. I'm sure you would appreciate that it's public funds that we are utilizing. So we definitely need to have an objective assessment in determining who would be best placed to access these funds and be able to benefit from it. So we would ask certain things, how long have you been in business? Do you have audited financials? In some cases, depending on the level of risk required in terms of the volume of funds, we might ask for management accounts as opposed to the audited financials. We want to see a proof of registration. Most of the support that we provide would be to local companies. So you must show that you are registered in Trinidad and Tobago. We also like to see a strategic intent. So evidence of a business plan or a strategic plan that shows, well, okay, I am interested in going out to these markets as part of my plan. I'm doing work towards it. I've done the research, or I need to have the research done to show that there is that intent to get into a particular market, because you would have some, you don't want it to be a case where there's a company that is not preparing for a particular market. So let's say Colombia, for instance. Colombia is nowhere on your map, but then ExporTT is executing a trade mission, and then you want to jump on that bandwagon, but you're starting from scratch and you don't know anything about it. So it's really important for us to have that understanding of where the company is at, what they're trying to do, and see the effort from their side as well, because we support as much as we can, but there are some things that we cannot do for the company, and that sort of characteristic of a company in terms of their willingness to work with us and do the work on their end, that is important to ensuring success as well. So those are some of the characteristics we look at. Obviously, there's a lot of documentary evidence that we need to show these things. You have to support a plan. You just can't come and say, Dhanraj, I really want to export to Colombia, and I mean, and we have a verbal discussion on it. It must be evidence and something that we could take forward.
All right, so when we return from the break, I want us to kind of quantify some of the things that are available. Also look at the work of sweat equity, because I guess we would have just spoken about it a little bit.
Sure.
Because there's some people who have done the work, they have done the research, and just on their own can't take it forward anymore. So in terms of how it is that situation is addressed, we start to speak on that. When we return, we are speaking with Dhanraj Harrypersad, General Manager, Client Service at ExporTT, and this is In Depth. Stay tuned, we'll return with more. All right, welcome back. It is In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. We are speaking about ExporTT, and we're really looking to focus in on the Export Booster Initiative. We're doing so with General Manager Client Service, Dhanraj Harrypersad. And Mr. Harrypersad, just before we took the break, we were asking the question of the person. They've done work, they have a paper trail, sweat equity. You see the effort that they've put in, and possibly they've even received awards or accreditation from outside of Trinidad and Tobago, but on their own wherewithal, they just can't go further anymore. How does the Export Booster Initiative serve a person like that?
Okay, so similar to how our work is structured, the Export Booster Initiative has two major facets to it. There's the capacity building, and then there's the export promotion. So the export promotion end is for those companies who are ready. They've done the work. They have that excess capacity. If they engage in a meeting with a buyer and the buyer says, okay, I'm ready for 2-3 containers, they are ready to ship those containers out. So those are the companies that we work with on the export promotion side. So they are the ones who we try to get onto our virtual trade missions. We do a lot of research for them. Under the Export Booster Initiative, we're also going to establish 2 trade facilitation offices, one in the Dominican Republic, one in Panama. And we're also setting up trade attaches in both Guyana and Jamaica, which is 2 of our major markets in CARICOM. So those larger companies and more export-ready companies, they are able to leverage these different offerings to be able to sell more or to expand in new markets that they're not currently in. Now, on the capacity building side, that is where the heavier weighting of the EBI is, because we recognize that there's an equation here with respect to generating more exports. You have people exporting more, but if you have more exporters who are also contributing, or exporters that are growing in size, that improves your contribution to the non-energy exports as well, which is our objective. And those small exporters, is that we focus on them as well in terms of growing them up to the medium and the eventual large exporters. And we do that by providing some support in terms of meeting import requirements. I spoke about the International Certification Fund. That is one of the major components of the EBI that is going to support those companies in being able to meet import requirements and be able to export to markets that they're not currently exporting in. Another initiative that I want to mention is the Export Accelerator. And you spoke about companies that have put in that effort and they have reached as far as they can reach. Maybe they lack certain expertise. What the Export Accelerator does, it provides seasoned coaching. These export managers who have worked in large export companies, they know the tricks of the trade. The path for them is well beaten, so they know exactly what they need to do to enter a market. And we paired up these coaches with 10 companies under our Export Accelerator program, and they are receiving that information firsthand and guidance in terms of entry into new markets. We're also providing training for them and some financial support in things like market research so that they could get customized research for their products in their target markets. And we're following up everything as we always do, because at the end of the day, we need to show, exports. So most things that we do, it usually ends up with those companies that are ready being able to meet with potential buyers and be able to sell their products. And at the end of the day, we have new exports as a result.
Now, 2 of the things that spring to mind listening to you, Dhanraj. One, you spoke about looking at exports other than oil and gas. So
yes,
is there a certain tier or certain categories that you said, okay, well, we really were actively progressing or pursuing, making sure that persons wanting to export these services or goods, we give them the help or the wherewithal that they need? And 2, are there parameters in terms of like, we're going to help someone this much, or it's up to this much? And I guess that also includes the counseling and the coaching.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so with respect to the support that we offer to the companies, it just depends on where they are trying to go on what they're trying to do, with respect. Like if you go into like a CARICOM market, there's a different level of support that you might require there, but might be more in terms of meeting with potential buyers, and that's the link that you need. If you're trying to get into a Latin American market, the import requirements and the navigation of those non-tariff barriers, as they're sometimes called, that might be important because maybe you find yourself signing on to a contract with someone and you're basically signing on to that distributor being your distributor for life. And there's a lot of legal implications in getting out of it. If you go into North America, which I mentioned before, then maybe the challenge here would be with respect to the standards and what you need to have in place to even start entering in that market. So the support varies depending on market, I would say, but also what you're trying to do as well. There are some exporters who might be interested in expanding in an existing market and others who are interested in breaking into an entirely new market, and the strategy will be somewhat different. Under the EBI, what we are trying to do is look into more of that expansion type activity, because if you are already in a market, you have already undergone all that effort to make it in, it makes sense to then invest in terms of expanding into that market. And we have a in-market promotion component under the EBI, where funding is provided to you to work with your distributor or your partner in the market to develop a promotional campaign, which might involve, sampling of your products in stores or advertising in the market as well. So if you're new to it, it allows you to build brand recognition and brand awareness in that market, and eventually move on from your first container to your second, to your third, and grow in that particular market before you then go on and take on that effort to break into another market, which is sometimes difficult to do.
And one of the things I really appreciate about work with the international certification, and as the website would have said, meeting the standard before you try to break into the market, because I can think of something as simple or as profound as the way you package what it is you're trying to export, but you're trying to export to a place that possibly the plastics, if you do using plastics, they need to meet a certain criteria of biodegradability, and you never thought about that. And
well, exactly, yeah. Well, I can give you an example. I mean, there was a case where we were working with an exporter to get into a market, and they had crackers that were circular, and then the market, they accepted that crackers are square. So it's something as simple as that, is that, they didn't think that this was a cracker because it didn't look like what they understand a cracker to be. So there are little details like this that you really need to be aware of, and that's why we always recommend that you do that research before, that you know what the requirements are. Because if you can imagine being having a conversation with a buyer, things are going well, they're ready to take the order from you, but the topic comes up about the import requirements or the standards, and then you don't have it, then that sale cannot happen, and then it's going to probably take you months into a year to achieve those things. So you just in standstill waiting for that to be implemented.
And with that, and you said that anyone can approach ExporTT, Mr. Harrypersad, but we have less than a minute. How do people do that? Is it an email, website, phone call? How do people approach you?
We're doing so much work on social media right now. I think if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, you're going to find a lot of content on ExporTT. We're doing quite a lot right now. So I would say visit our social media channels. If you need to email us, info@exportt.co.tt, that is fine. But please visit our social media channels. Look at all the things that we're doing, and if there's anything that is interesting to you, please reach out, and there are persons that are waiting to start interacting with you. If you have any interest in exporting at all, as I said, you don't need any requirements to have that initial conversation. We'll be able to point you in a direction. So we really do look forward to your contact, to your emails, to your calls, and to start working with you.
Thank you so much, General Manager Client Service at Dhanraj Harrypersad of ExporTT. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, we want to thank you for tuning in to In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you for joining us.